I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On this week's episode, we will discuss the Gators getting a big win over Samford, as expected. We haven't always seen that in these moments the last few years, so it's good to see the Gators go out and do what we expect out of them. But we really got something special here. Again, everybody, before we go into it, yes, it's Samford. We know it's Samford. Like it's an FCS opponent. We saw these guys come into the swamp and score 42 a couple years ago, though, Will. So it's not too far in the distant memory. So it is possible. You could definitely do worse than what we saw on Saturday night. But the layer that we are going to focus on for this show tonight is predictably DJ Lagway making his debut. And Will, you look at the game, you look at his schedule, and you see Samford in week two. It's sandwiched between Miami and Texas A&M, and it's just the type of game you just look over and go, okay, it's one of those games in the middle. It goes to show you every week matters on a schedule. Every week is a part of the story for not just the season, but potentially what we might have witnessed on Saturday night was the start of a very bright future for DJ Lagway.
Yeah, I mean, Lagway was great. I think, but there have been other guys who've been great against sort of these FCS cupcakes, and that was one of the things I took a look at in my post game article and sort of compared him to some other guys who've started. So I looked back to 2011, just started the Muschamp era. Those games against again FCS opponents. These are 12 games. Quarterbacks with the names like Brantley, Brissett, Morhenwig, Driscoll, Franks, Trask, Jones, Richardson, Mertz, and now Lagway. So the average QB rating was 211. Lagway was 265. The average yards above replacement, my stat, is 3.6. Lagway was 8.9. The average completion percentage, 74%. Lagway was 72. And the average yards per attempt, 11.4. And Lagway was at 18.2. Now, certainly that was boosted by a couple of big plays on the little pop passes by Trey Wilson. At the same time, even if you take away the big pop pass to Wilson, Lagway is still averaging 15 yards per play, or yards per attempt. So, again, I mean, I think yes, absolutely. It's not like Anthony Richardson didn't play really, really well against Eastern Washington, and Jeff Driscoll played very, very well against Eastern Kentucky in 2014. This doesn't necessarily portend that Lagway is going to be the best player ever to play in Gainesville. But what it does suggest is there are some games in there where the quarterbacks haven't played that well. So, Morhenwig against Georgia Southern averaged 4.9 yards per per attempt. Brissett against Jacksonville State averaged 7 yards per attempt. Brantley against Furman averaged 11.8 yards per attempt. Felipe Franks against Charleston Southern, 9.1. Trask against Towson after Franks went down, averaged 9.4. So, you start looking at that and you go 18.2 yards per throw is special against air. And when's the last time that we saw a Florida quarterback go, you know what, I'm not going to take that open route that's short or that open intermediate route. I'm going to let it fly. And I'm going to let it fly over and over and over again. And a few times I'm going to let it fly into double coverage. A few times I'm going to lock onto my receiver. A few times I'm just going to trust my guy to go get it. And, look, I mean, I think overall, you just look at the stat line 18 to 25, 456 yards, 3 touchdowns, a quarterback rating at 265. Like I said, my yards above replacement has him at 8.9. And remember, like the highest ever is like 4.5 or 5 for Michael Vick back in 1999. So, obviously, Samford, we have to take that into account. But even when you compare Lagway's game against other Gator quarterbacks in other FCS opponents, this was special, and you could feel it. Like you just felt even against Miami, the offense felt different. But there, you're sitting there going, well, the Hurricanes are way up. Is it just that they sort of took their foot off the gas? In this one, obviously Samford didn't take their foot off the gas, but they didn't have the gas to stick with DJ Lagway. And it's interesting. I mean, he had like 6 throws through the first quarter and 13 minutes.
Yep.
And then finally they threw the ball right at the end of the half. Kind of bad drive there to end the second quarter, and then came right out and he's chucking the ball all over the place by the time they go to the third quarter. And at that point, they put the game away. So I think you got to be excited about DJ Lagway if you're a Gator fan. I don't know that we know everything that we have, but this was one of those where Lagway could have face planted. Lagway could have been average. Lagway could have been spectacular, or Lagway could have been otherworldly, right? There's probably like 4 or 5 different levels that he could have been. I don't think he could have been better than he was on Saturday night against Samford. And when Samford's in front of you, that's who you can play well against. You can't play well against Georgia unless you've played well against Samford, unless Dan Mullen has you making your first start against Georgia. And so, look, it still may be a couple of face plants at some point along the way if Lagway ends up taking the con for the rest of the year. But I think you're okay with that because we've seen the potential of what might be to come.
Not me. It will happen. It will happen. It's a freshman quarterback. He's going to make his mistakes, but it's like you said, you can do one of two things when you get on the field, and we saw the better side of that equation, the much better side. I mean, hey, look, obviously, 456 passing yards, pretty nice on the stat sheet when Eugene Wilson could take a little pop pass and just get around the corner and just hit the turbo. It just unbelievable when he started coming around the corner untouched, and you're just like, oh boy, he split a couple defenders, just hit it. It was great to see. You saw a lot of Florida Gators running an open field. We haven't seen that a lot the last few years too. It was nice. You saw six receivers with receptions to 36 yards or more. I love that on the night. Again, it just made you feel the Miami game. You looked at the optimistic side of this roster and you watched the Miami game and you come out of that going, man, what? We're just lying to ourselves all off season. What's going on here? And then you watch a game like this, you go, okay, the guys are there. Let's see it in a real moment now, right? Like it's Samford again. I'll say it again. I totally understand what the game is, but we haven't seen these types of performances in these games in some instances in recent years as well. I mean, you go back to the Charlotte game, I realize Charlotte's an FBS team, but Charlotte was not a great team last year. Struggled to put the ball in the end zone in that game. So you could certainly be sloppy. You look for overarching themes in these games too. And what, seven penalties yesterday, 77 yards, I believe. So still sloppy.
He did
Fumble
have
on
the
the goal line.
timeout coming out of the third quarter.
Timeout coming out of the third quarter. It's still operation stuff on game day, still a thing. Okay. We know who this team is. Like we know what it looks like right now. We know what it looks like. But if Graham Mertz played yesterday, we know what his ceiling looks like. And it's not what we saw from DJ Lagway.
Yeah, I mean, look, I struggle with folks who look at what we saw yesterday, look at what we saw against Miami for Mertz, and go, "Oh yeah, like let's start this guy because he's got more experience." I mean, I have a couple of thoughts here. One is that you're really building to 2025 or 2026 at this
Mm-hmm.
point,
Mm-hmm.
uh, given where this team is going to be and given what the schedule is. Now, maybe you say, okay, well, I'll wait until I get the second or third loss, and we're definitely out of the playoff race and definitely out of the SEC race in order to to make that switch. But by then, the problem is that the fan base is already fed up with the losses so far in the Napier era, and it's going to be difficult to do that. The other thing is so I went back and I looked at Mertz's stats now, including all last year and Miami now this year. And when you subtract the cupcakes, his QB rating is 148.3. His yards above replacement, negative zero point 0.8. Last 5 games for Mertz, his QB rating is 139.7, wins above replace or yards above replacement, negative 1.0. Against ranked opponents in his career, 70% completion percentage, pretty good. QB rating 140, yards above replacement, negative 1.0. So he's not excelling against better opponents, and that's
How,
who's
how
coming up on the
about
schedule.
how about wins?
You can do that too. Though there is the one place where I think I will defend Graham Mertz, which is that in the losses last year, the defense gave up 39 points per game.
Hey, I understand. I'm being a little sarcastic there, but look, Florida's got a team. It's a team thing. I don't put all those losses on Graham Mertz, believe me. However, coming out of the press conference, you're feeling very good about this performance. It was very fun to watch. I enjoyed every second of it. Focusing on the positive here, enjoyed every second of it. We'll get to some of the deep balls, some of what we saw, but first. let's just address the elephant in the room here with Billy Napier in the press conference refuses to commit to next week. And hey, look, they asked him about Mertz coming back, and he says, "Yeah, we got a great young quarterback, and we got a great quarterback coming back." Okay, I get it. A little bit of gamesmanship, maybe. Texas A&M, you don't want to give them the exact answer to the test ahead of time. But my only issue with that, you have a guy that has injected a little bit of life into you. You were on life support last week, and you get a shot in the arm like DJ Lagway last night, and you just don't let people enjoy that in the moment. You're gonna make people go. You're gonna even put the question into the fan base on whether or not he's going to start against A&M. If this were a game where we're both 2-0, if this were a game where we've been a highly competitive program in the last year, I understand doing that. But I don't even understand. I think if you have two eyes and common sense, it's apparent what needs to happen going forward. Why not just take the easiest PR win of all time? Say, yeah, loved what I saw. That's where we're going. We're going in this direction. I don't. Maybe you don't want to do that in the moment. I know Napier's a methodical guy, but man, that was a chance to really get people excited about next week. But you got to get the fan base fired up with A&M coming into the swamp.
Yeah, so I've thought about this for a little bit. So I retweeted his comments and was like, read the room, man, read the room. And sort of had the same thoughts you did, but I've thought about it a little bit more sense. And I actually think Napier did the right thing from the standpoint of if you were an employee, you wouldn't want to find out you'd been fired before they actually pulled you into a room and told you you'd been fired, right? Like you don't want to find out from your colleagues that you've been fired or find out from News Channel 7 that you've been fired. You'd like to know from your boss directly. And so if that's what this is, if it's Napier is going to sit them down in a room on Monday or Sunday night, we're recording this Sunday night. If Napier's going to sit them down in a room and say, look, we've decided to go with Lagway, we will announce it. But we wanted to tell you first. I'm okay with that. Like I think that's actually fine. And does it quench a little bit of the excitement coming out of the game? Maybe. Could he have said, that's a determination we're going to make. I will let you know early in the week. Maybe that's something that he could have said, right? But regardless, it was going to be this. Well, Napier hasn't done much right in his tenure, and so even if he'd have said Lagway's the starter, you would have had a bunch of people probably going, well, like this is it, right? So I think he would have gotten criticism no matter what. And I do feel for Mertz. I mean, Mertz is a player who came to Florida, played very well last year, given what we had seen in his time at Wisconsin. And for all intents and purposes, has been a welcoming person to DJ Lagway coming in. This could be really awkward. Mertz thus far has not allowed that to happen. And so perhaps Napier's just saying, look, I owe my quarterback, I owe my captain essentially the courtesy of telling him that he lost his job face to face. And I'm going to stall until that happens. So I'm going to reserve judgment on Saturday's comments until we hear Monday's press conference. And if Monday's press conference is still, well, we got two good quarterbacks, and we have it in the plan to play both of them. If it's a repeat on Monday, then I'm gonna blast Napier because that's stupid. But if this was just hey, I need to tell my guy that he's not going to have the job anymore, then I think that's an okay thing, and we should probably chill out, even though it's not that much
I
fun.
understand. I understand what you're saying, Will. Is there a little bit? This is the part I find a little odd. I know Mertz seems like a great guy. I've said this over and over again. He's an easy guy to root for. This is the future, though. This is the future, and like I think this is such an easy decision at this point that it cannot be. This is not a fourth year guy that's been in the program and put in his time and done all that. This is a guy that came in last year from Wisconsin in the portal, second year in the program. So if he were a sophomore, say, let's say he was a freshman, he came in, he was just a sophomore, and you got two young, they're two young guys. One guy is one thing, one guy is another thing. It's pretty simple, the comparison here in terms of where you're going down the road. I think if these guys were the same age, this wouldn't be a discussion because I think there's one guy that showed a different flash than the other guy. I think Mertz probably has Napier's trust. I think Mertz has been, seems like everything we hear has been a great guy behind the scenes, right? I think he's an awesome interview, very grown up guy. Obviously he's got the maturity level. He's been in, what, this is year five, year 5 year in college. So he's got the maturity level. I, I understand all that stuff. But I think if you're Billy Napier, you know the talk that's been around the program since his Miami loss. Like this is your get out of jail free card potentially, right? With DJ Lagway. You go back to Graham Mertz. What's the upside of Graham Mertz versus the upside of DJ Lagway? And that's what I don't think this should be. I'm really bringing this up now because I don't think this discussion should go much into this week if you're handling it the right way. And
No,
I
like I
think
s-
this should be a quick discussion, turn the page, move on. And you hear about Mertz being a great teammate. A great teammate would be like a great teammate can be a backup. And guess what? We saw DJ Lagway get hit a few times unnecessarily, in my opinion. Probably got to like be careful about how the way you're going about some of those hits. But a couple helmet to helmets, they didn't seem to want to call some helmet to helmets last night. But Mertz could be on the field again. He could be on the field quickly. So backup quarterback, you're one play away at all times. So it's not that big. It's not that big a deal for Mertz in that sense. But I just think for Napier, his tenure and the fan base and his relationship with the fan base and everything, man, you can inject some excitement in with this move. And I think that Lagway going for 400 plus yards and 3 touchdowns through the air only made that he gave you the clear to go ahead and do that.
yeah, I mean, I don't know about get out of jail free, but
It's
certainly,
your only chance. Didn't
well, I
say it was
mean,
going to happen. It's your only
well, so I mean,
chance.
so I wrote an article on Friday that asked whether DJ Lagway was ready to be a star and broke down some of his film from the Miami game. So if you haven't checked that out, go check it out because I think there's actually some stuff there that you can glean that makes you feel better about what you saw against Samford. If you're questioning what we saw against Samford, go back and look at Miami, and I think that actually kind of answers some of your questions. But the other aspect of it is if Napier on again, all I'm saying is that I think it's easy to jump to conclusions and say Napier should have immediately named him the starting quarterback. I think all of us know that things felt different when Lagway was out there on the field. Like you had a confidence that they might actually be able to pick up a 3rd and 8. You had confidence that you might not even be in a 3rd and 8 because the ball was going to be moving down the field. And when you missed your one shot, you didn't go, "Oh, well, that's the only shot we're going to take." And it's going to be 3 quarters before we take another one. They took a bunch of different shots in that game, and it just feels different. So that's absolutely true. All I'm saying is that Napier, I think, we can give him the grace of being able to say, I looked at the tape on Sunday, I sat down with Graham, I sat down with DJ. We've decided to make a change at quarterback, right? If that's what he says on Monday, then whatever he said on Saturday after the game, I don't really care about so long as he makes that determination. Now, if he comes out and does the same spiel where it's, we got 2 good quarterbacks, we're going to share reps, we're going to need them both. We have a package for DJ, just like we did in the Miami game that they didn't use until Mertz got injured. If they've got that same type of stuff, then yeah, it's going to be an issue. But again, I think this is an interesting sort of Rorschach test for Napier, which is he clearly is a conservative guy just overall. Right. He is not the scared money, don't make money guy that we were sold when he came in. He's really conservative. And part of that is going with what you know. And Mertz is going with what you know. And quite honestly, Kyle Trask sort of shows that even guys who are like offensive savants don't necessarily know what they have in the backup because you figure that if Mullen had known what he had in Trask, he would have brought him in for Franks well before they actually did, well before the injury in the Kentucky game. And we certainly, I think, time has proven that people who were talking about Anthony Richardson being in instead of Emory Jones were right as well. Now, look, Richardson may have been raw compared to Emory Jones, but Richardson had a it that Jones just did not. I think that's what people are seeing when they see DJ Lagway. I mean, the guy And he has, like, unlike a guy like Anthony Richardson, who was ranked in like the 150th range overall for recruits, or Trask, who was a 2-star prospect coming out of high school. This is a guy who was the best player in high school football last year, threw for like 58 touchdowns, 74% completion, or something like that. Like, this is the guy that you targeted years ago to say he's going to be the guy who changes the program. And because Florida hasn't won many games in the Napier era, there's not a lot of time to show this guy that you targeted is the guy. Now, look, if you can, this was always sort of the thought coming into the season was Napier was either going to have to win 9 games, or at least in my opinion, he was going to have to win 9 games, or Lagway was going to have to come in and prove that he was the guy. And then people would say, well, we got to give Napier more time because you don't want to have Napier leave and then Lagway leave as well. Whatever he needs to do to facilitate that hope is what he's going to have to do if he wants to hold on to his position. And going back to Mertz at this point really puts that in doubt. And so I expect him to name Lagway the starter, or maybe he does some back and forth this week, and then Lagway comes out and plays the entire game against A&M, and it's all it is just chatter and fodder, and he does it as sort of like gamesmanship against A&M. But if it turns out to be the Graham Mertz show and Florida falls to A&M, it's going to be a really, really tough week for Billy Napier, because there was another decision that was a little probably lower risk, right? Going with Lagway in terms of like media and in terms of criticism and things like that. I think the criticism would be less if he went with Lagway than if he went back to Mertz. So he's going to really have to believe that Mertz gives him a better shot to win, and we'll see what he believes. He'll certainly end up projecting that to us, regardless of what the decision is.
Again, I'm not even an anti Mertz. It's more just like I have two eyes, and I saw one quarterback. I've seen one quarterback over the course of 12. Well, I guess it's technically 11 starts, right? He got injured. Well, no, 12 because he started
12.
against Missouri, right? So 12 starts. I've seen what he's done in 12 starts, and I saw enough. And even though, again, I know it's Samford, you're going to see that SEC defense. Texas A&M is going to come in here with a solid defensive line. They played head up against Notre Dame. The tough defensive battle against Notre Dame. I think they posted a shutout this weekend too. So I mean, they're going to come in with a much tougher test, understandably. But from what you saw on Saturday night, where you saw the deep throw, you talked about in your article a little bit, just the ability to recognize and have the willingness to go deep. I loved what you pointed out in your Sunday article with Elijah Badger. You did a freeze frame when Lagway let go of the ball, and Badger's like about even with the defensive back, and you're saying that's a quarterback with some vision. That's like he sees that, oh, Badger's one on one, he's going to beat that guy down the field, and he's okay taking that risk despite having an open crosser come across the middle. He had easy probably 20-25 yard gain, but he saw the deep ball and went with it. And we saw multiple examples of that where he was throwing guys open downfield basically. And they built the receiver core to have guys that can run and get this done. Badger looked great on that deep ball, that touchdown throw to Tank Hawkins. There's several examples. I mean, and then maybe the highlight throw of the night was the flick of the wrist, the step up to Aiden Mizell down the right sideline.
Yeah, so the word that I used, and it's funny because I had a play that was they ran a flood in high school for Lagway, and he decided to go deep, and so we highlighted that in our preseason magazine. We have about a 10-page spread, maybe 7-page spread on Lagway in that preseason magazine, and you can see those things translating on the field. And the word that I used was anticipation, is that he knows if his guy's going full speed and the safety sinks his hips and breaks down, his guy's going to beat him as long as he throws the ball far enough. And there was even a play that I highlighted in the article this week where he let it go so early that it allowed the safety to come off of tight end Hayden Hansen and get into the line of sight of Trey Wilson. Now, he threw it in a place where only Wilson was going to be able to catch it, but it was one of those things where like he got so excited that he had what he wanted, that he let go of it so soon that it allowed another defender to get into the play, and Hansen wound up wide open over the middle. And so the exciting part about Lagway is, as like because those deep shots are a threat, as the safeties start backing out, all the underneath and all of the mid-range stuff is going to open up. And with Mertz, it's all of the short stuff and maybe sort of the intermediate to mid-range is necessary to open up the deep shots. And the deep shots, at least against Miami, Florida didn't hit. Lagway was willing to take the deep shots. He can anticipate those guys coming open. The play to Hawkins is a great example. He actually threw in a double coverage. He just knew that Hawkins had him beat and lofted it up there so he could get it. I actually think there's a better throw to make on that particular play, but the anticipation allows him to throw the guy open, even though he's got double coverage, and trust that his receiver's going to go get it. And Anthony Richardson made a throw today for the Colts against the Texans. It was kind of similar. It was something where he sort of slid or slipped as he went back into his drop, and then he just came up, sort of flick of a wrist, big deep throw, hits one of the Colts receivers over both the corner and the safety. Lagway has that ability. But as he learns to check down, as he learns to sort of go from long to medium to short, when he sees two guys on long, to not just let it go, but to say, okay, now I'm going to hit the guy in the intermediate range coming across the middle, like all of a sudden, everything's going to open up. And that was the thing that you really noticed when you watched the game is, so I harp on high school completion percentage all the time in terms of it translating from high school to college. And the reason, and it doesn't actually translate between college to the pros, which is interesting. But I think the reason is because in college, the hash marks are so much further apart that what that means is that a defense cannot cover everyone, or you're going to have a one-on-one matchup somewhere. And you're going to know what it is because the hash marks are so wide that the defense kind of has to declare what it's doing before the snap. And so you've got this big, wide area to the field side. If you're on the right hash, the left side is just this enormous open grass. And the whole air raid concept with Mike Leach is just run to open grass. And a lot of offenses do that now. And so the play to Abrams, a great example. You had essentially a square in on the outside. You had a go from the slot receiver, and then you had sort of a I call it like a skinny post maybe to Hawkins. I mean, he's coming all the way across the field, but it's essentially the go and the post are targeting that safety in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And Lagway just gets to read that one way or the other. The defense can't do the right thing on that play if Lagway makes the right read. Now, the interesting thing is they threw the touchdown. He throws a touchdown to Hawkins, and I actually think that's probably not the right place to go with the ball. But all the other times during the game, there were guys who were wide open where it's like, there's no one within 5 yards of the guy when he catches that ball, which means Lagway has an understanding of the offense and understands the spacing and is able to throw it with the right air, the right touch, the right velocity to hit those guys in stride and make sure that they can continue running. So, um, look, again, just Samford, we have to say that because that does matter, right? I mean, when the defensive backs are 5 yards off, is that because it's Samford or is that because Lagway is going to the right guy? At the same time, I think it's fair to say exactly what you did. Well, last year against McNeese State and last year against Charlotte, Mertz was good but not great in any of those games for what those games were. In fact, it's one of those things where like Charlotte, his yards above replacement was 2.4. McNeese State, it was 3.1. So essentially Lagway was 3 times better against Samford than Mertz was in either of those cupcakes last year. And I think that matters. And that's not a shot at Graham Mertz, but I put a quote from you in the article today talking about, look, that Mertz is a good guy. He's easy to root for, but he's 5-7. And
This
it's
isn't
not.
Chris Leak where it's year 4 and you have a star freshman coming in, right? Like Leak was an established presence here on campus and he won a lot. Chris Leak also won a bunch of games. I know Zook got fired, but they're still winning 8, 9 games. I know like in
Two was
Kirk
the
Meyer,
MVP. Two was
they
the
won nine and
MVP of the
three.
Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, they went 9. He went 9-3. He went 9-3 the first year with Meyer too. So it's like he was a winning quarterback and,
Well,
and and playing
yeah,
good football. It just was it the maximum? The question was, were we getting the most out of the offense with Chris Lee? That was the question at the time. But a guy like that, the established veteran, the leader on the team type of thing. And like I know Mertz is a veteran leader. I know the team loves him. I know Napier loves him, but this is a young locker room. That 06 team, they had some older guys. There was a nice split. There's some older guys, a lot of vets on that team. You take a vet out with a veteran heavy team might be a different reaction than moving on to the young guy when the team is young. Like the guys that are here now, they're on the younger side. Most of our roster is on the younger side here. We don't have a big senior class. This isn't like a type of thing where you're going to lose the roster if you do this. So I just think that I'm just trying to think of the upside, like because I've seen the takes already on X, and that's why on Twitter. That's why I'm coming in. That's why I'm coming in with guns blazing tonight, Will, because it's like, what do people need to see for this to not be a discussion? I don't understand how this could possibly be a discussion, even though it's Samford. We'll say it again. How many times have we said it tonight, Will, so far? Even though it's Samford, we understand that. I'm okay. My point is, if we go out next week and throw three interceptions, you're probably also going to see three touchdowns on top of it. It's a different cat coming in here to play quarterback at Florida, and I think that you have to build toward the future with this team. People aren't expecting us to compete for the SEC this year. So if you're not a contender this year, start investing in the future. I think, and after the Miami game, again, if we lose by one field goal to Miami, I think we're having a different discussion. But the way it was just so non-competitive, and the way that it was just such a beatdown from the beginning, you can't you can't do that all season. You can't show up with the same thing every week and expect that the fans are going to be okay with that. You got to start looking forward. You got to start looking forward.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned those leak years. So there's a couple things there. It's 2005, the Gators were 18th overall in the country in points per game allowed. And then I think they were 13th in 2006 in points per game allowed. So you had shutdown defenses that Chris Leak was able to play with, and that makes a huge difference in terms of going with the veteran, right? Those were national championship level defenses.
Mm-hmm.
And so you sit there and go, we're going to go with the guy who's the veteran, who we trust, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. And Leak obviously is a better player than Mertz. I don't think there's any dispute there. I mean, the guy leads Florida in passing yards for his career. So, given some of the guys we've had at Florida, Leak is a much better player. But there were some holes there in terms of how good Leak was and how good of a fit he was, no doubt about that as well. But that's sort of the second thing, is we've talked a lot this offseason about a Lagway package. But and Lagway is more mobile than Mertz, but Lagway and Michael Vick. Lagway isn't Anthony Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
Lagway isn't even Emory Jones. Lagway is a drop back passer with a lightning quick release. Like I tweeted out, I thought he reminded me of Aaron Rodgers when he was back there sort of hopping in the air to deliver the ball without having to actually step into it. So if you're taking, like, if you have a package for Lagway, the way to maximize what you're getting out of him, like let's say you gave him 10 plays a game. Are you really going in and running read option to, like, get him hit 3 yards downfield and not use the skill that he just showed us is, like, a premium skill?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you putting him in there to throw the ball? And if you're putting him in there to throw the ball, why is he not in there to throw the ball all the time? And the only question then is, what do they see in practice when Lagway has to make an adjustment when the defense does something post snap, right? When the defense looks like it's in a single high coverage and all of a sudden drops into quarters, when he thinks he sees middle of the field closed and all of a sudden it's middle of the field open. And we saw this a little bit against Miami. One of the things that I think happened on the interception, that both the guard and the tackle on the right hand side pulled. But the only reason that you do that, like, the quarterback oftentimes has the ability to check protections. And so he could have, and there was a play fake on the running back on the play. And by the time Lagway got done basically faking the handoff, he was hit. And that's where the interception came from. So is it his job to check, to have the running back sit there and pass protection, essentially get rid of get rid of the play fake and have the running back block? Does he need to check so that the offensive linemen don't pull? Does he need to hand the ball off to the running back because they have an advantage from a numbers perspective with those guys pulling? Like, all of those things would have been better options than what actually happened. And what I don't know, and what nobody can know, is what Lagway's job was on that play and whether he allowed himself essentially to get hit and throw the interception because he did not get the team in the right play in the right configuration. And that is a space where I definitely think Graham Mertz should have an advantage when it comes to his play over Lagway. And you go into this game against A&M, and A&M is going to do some things if Lagway's in there. They're going to do some things to try to confuse him post snap. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But one of the really nice signs is against Samford, you at least saw his eyes up and a confidence to deliver the ball in situations where things weren't necessarily the most comfortable. And so you're not going to learn that until you get out there with the bullets flying. So unless he's just like completely incompetent when the Gator defense decides to change something post snap in practice, I can't imagine a scenario where he wouldn't be able to handle it at least somewhat against Texas A&M. And considering that even if the Gator defense was making an adjustment post snap, what we saw against Miami would suggest that they have not shut down DJ Lagway all the way through. And I think that's maybe the last thing is we don't know what's going on in the locker room, right? I mean, if Lagway has been as good as he was on Saturday all throughout fall camp, or if they've seen him ramp up to that, then the question becomes, all right, like, what do the guys in the locker room think? Because I guarantee you they had a lot more fun on Saturday than they did the week before against Miami. And if they believe that DJ Lagway is the guy to get them the win against A&M, if they believe DJ Lagway is a guy who can help get them to 8 or 9 wins this season, if they believe DJ Lagway can help them compete against the Georgias and the Ole Misses and the LSUs of the world, well, then that's more important than what any of us in our basements talking about, right? It's what do the guys who are in that locker room think, and if they think Graham Mertz is the better option to help them win the game, then they've seen some stuff we haven't. But I mean, I think that then is sort of a reasonable path forward. But if they're looking at it going, man, I don't know, like that guy needs to get a shot, then he needs to get a shot. And like I said, we'll see when Napier gives his press conference whether it was sort of coach speak on Saturday and he's made that decision or whether he's going to give us more fodder for the rest of the week.
Very patient approach from a guy in his basement for Billy Napier there. Well, that's I'm sure he'll be
I
pleased.
am very sanguine that at the end of the year we will have a decision. Like
It's
this is not like the Miami game sort of set things up to where this is make or break for Mr. Napier. And one of my big worries coming into the year was that we were going to sit there at 6-6 or 7-5 and not know what to do. And 7-5 and having to come in with an extension is like the worst. like you like to me, you just want some certainty about what you're going to do. And so if Napier's golden child comes in and turns into the star we think he can, and Florida's rocking and rolling by the time we get to the end of the year, great. I think you carry that on. But if either Lagway isn't able to get the job done, or if Graham Mertz comes in and again unable to get the job done, then there's a different discussion, and I think Gator Nation's ready for that.
I know a 13-0 team from last year that is probably not too fired up about an extension that they provided this offseason. But the one thing we know will happen that we can guarantee will happen is Jimmy Sexton will win. Jimmy Sexton always wins. So I hey, well, again, we can let's come back down to earth here. It was very exciting to watch DJ Lagway, in case you can't tell from the start of the show here. So we'll come back to earth. It was a blast watching the game Saturday night. It's Samford, we know. Uh, but your expectations heading into the first SEC matchup, obviously Mike Elko is a defensive whiz. We've seen him do great things at Texas A&M in the past as a defense coordinator. We've seen him overachieve at Duke. It was a absolute slugfest with Notre Dame for most of that game. And that Northern Illinois game makes that Notre Dame win look even worse there for
That's
A&M.
great. Yeah.
But but still, it was a really good performance on the defensive side of the ball for both teams throughout most of the night there. And I think A&M's going to be very tough on that side of the ball in particular. What are we expecting for DJ Lagway? I know we're going to see some freshman mistakes. We're going to see, issues with reading a coverage or reading, maybe helping with a shift in an alignment or whatever. Those things are going to exist. But if Lagway were to start against this A&M defense, what's the type of performance we can expect to see?
I mean, so I obviously it's not going to be 450 yards. I don't think. If it is, then we got to start questioning why Lagway wasn't playing against Miami. But I actually think so. What you're looking for from Lagway is because it's a home game. You're looking for him to make sure he's not making any major mistakes early. You're looking for him to make the right reads. You're looking for him to allow Montrell Johnson to get going early on, and then you're looking for him on those play action opportunities to take the deep shot to hit it. And if you hit two or three of those and you're at 21, 24, 28 points, you should be able to win this game, and you should be able to get there, I think, fairly easily. And I say that because Connor Wegman so far for A&M has just been awful. So 23 of 44, 225 yards, 5.1 yards per attempt, and a rating of 101.1. It was even worse against Notre Dame. And, like you mentioned, the Northern Illinois loss for Notre Dame makes us go, all right, well, how good, I mean, quality loss against Notre Dame, but how good is really that quality loss for A&M? And one of the things that people always underrate is how much a coaching transition impacts a team. And you saw it with like Kirby Smart when he took over at Georgia. You saw it with Nick Saban when he took over Alabama. Those teams kind of take a step back and then accelerate if it's a good coach. So even if we think Elko is going to be an awesome coach, even if we think A&M has great talent, I'm not sure that matters in year one while they're still trying to get all this stuff situated. Now, the thing that worries me about this one is the defensive back situation for Florida. They got so many guys who are out. They had guys out. They had three guys, I think, out. Was it Sharif Denson was out, Devin Moore was out, and Asa Turner was out.
And
I don't know whether
Jackson during the game, I saw.
so Jakeem Jackson goes down with a pulled hamstring in this
Yeah.
game. So now you've got Jackson with a hamstring, Turner with a hamstring. You've got Moore with a separated shoulder, and I don't know what Sharif Denson's ailment is, but Denson has been the star. Moore obviously was a starting corner. Turner was a starting safety, and then you've got Jackson who was playing for Moore. Right. So you're now down to your fourth string cornerback. You're down to your third string safety who's out there, and you're at your second string nickelback in Aaron Gates coming in. Now, Gates played pretty well in the game against Samford, but also again Samford. We got to throw that out there as well. So to me, that's the question, right? The question is um, Florida's defensive backs and how they hold up against a offense that has been struggling so far in A&M, but it doesn't take much. And Wegman has been much better the last few years. So last year, before he got injured in 4 games, and remember, he had a big game against Miami to start that year,
Yeah.
156.8 quarterback rating. So well above average. It's kind of Mertz where Mertz was last year. So not fantastic, but definitely not bad. And this year 101.1, so gone way down. Now the year before he was at 132.3, so in his career he's 137.6, and 137 is significantly below average in the NCAA, usually around 145 to 148. So that's sort of the key question: is who's showing up when it's Connor Wegman? Is it going to be the guy that we've seen thus far this year? Is it going to be the guy we saw last year? Is it going to be sort of an amalgam of the guy we've seen over the last 3 years? And to me, the question probably is more A&M's offense against Florida's defense than it is the other way around.
Yeah, based on recent history, definitely wouldn't underestimate anybody coming in against our defense on that. But what I'm really concerned with, especially let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball. We really saw Miami on both sides of the ball have their way with Florida in the trenches. Like we know this defensive line group for A&M, certainly in the recruiting sphere had a lot of big talent. Walter Nolan's playing ball at Ole Miss now. We'll see him later in the season, but you still have some really solid players along that defensive front for the Aggies. Obviously Mertz was. hit a bunch in that Miami game under constant pressure in that game. We saw a zero point 0.0 PFF grade from a right tackle, I believe, which I didn't know. I didn't know that was even possible. I thought maybe if you lay a hand on someone that could get you at least a percentage of a point or something. But how are we feeling about this offensive line going up against what should be a pretty solid Aggies defensive front?
Yeah, so I'm actually curious to hear from you. What do you like? What do you feel like when it comes to the offensive line? And I have my opinions, but I'm curious, Nick. Like, you watched the same thing I did. What did you feel like as you were watching the Gators offensive line?
It's very unstable at the moment. I just don't have much confidence in it at the moment. I think especially on that right side, I think even from the guard spot, I think there's a lot to be decided from the guard play still too. So I really the one point of confidence I have is at the center position. But I do see this as a problem. And another reason for another check, I'm trying to move on from the Lagway point of the discussion, but another reason for Lagway is he offers you a bit more mobility back there. So if you do get in trouble, there could be more options back there for he can actually move around and do a little extra back there for you. So I think this offensive front, uh, it's concerning. It's very concerning still. I'm not excited about it. I thought it was looking a little more solid than it's actually been so far, particularly at the tackle positions. The tackle, I just said I'm concerned about the guard play. I thought we were more solid at the guard spots, but the tackle and the guard spots have been a problem, which I'm basically naming almost the entire offensive line there, Will.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me is so Nick De La Torre had had a series of tweets today that I thought were pretty good. So he listed the offensive line snaps. So Slaughter had 54 at center, Harris at 51, George at 44, Crenshaw Dixon at 35, Waits at 28, Barber at 24, and Manuel at 24. There's some other snaps in there as well, but Austin Barber graded out as Florida's best offensive lineman, but he played less in this game than he did before. And, Napier had sort of talked about getting Barber a larger role after that Miami game. So they're rotating a lot of guys in there, which is interesting considering that, in
Doesn't
my
that
mind,
say
they've
that
got
they're
some.
not settled? Doesn't that say that they're not settled? They're
Well,
still
it
looking
does,
for the
but
answers.
but I mean, the guys who are playing the best are getting the least amount of snaps. So it's one of those things where, what's being evaluated in terms of, what's being evaluated in terms of those offensive linemen. And maybe their evaluations are different than ours. They've certainly said that before about PFF isn't the be all end all. Certainly, at the same time, I think you need to settle on five, right? And a couple of guys are going to get injured. And against Samford, I have no problem with those guys shuffling in and out. You want to get those guys reps.
Yeah.
But the fact that they rotated them like they did against Miami was a little bit strange. And I'm going to be curious to see as we move on, and this is probably something to watch for, is how often and how much are they rotating guys on the offensive line against A&M, against Mississippi State, against Tennessee coming up. Because if they're still unsettled 3 or 4 games from now, regardless of who you have at quarterback, it's going to be a problem because Billy Napier's offense is predicated on being able to run the ball and then play action off of it.
Hmm.
And it's not a coincidence that Montrell Johnson ripped a couple of 8 or 10 yard runs, and then all of a sudden they run the play action, and that's the ball that Lagway hits deep to Badger because the safety had come over to take away the running play that was sitting there. So, I'm not real excited about the offensive line at this point. I don't see somebody who's the difference maker. I think they went for it on 4th and 1 out of the Wildcat. Obviously, at that point, the defense knows what's coming, but you should be able to block it, right? You've got one extra blocker and you should be able to block that. Instead, they get stuffed. Adazio even mentioned that they missed a block on the play,
Hmm.
right? So not only it wasn't just that they were out physical, but they actually missed an assignment on the 4th and 1. And when that kind of stuff happens, it doesn't necessarily breed confidence that when you get into that 4th and 1 situation against Georgia, that you're gonna be able to get the job done. And that's what's coming, right? I mean, that's the problem is Napier even mentioned in his post-game press conference. He's like, I don't want to say anything bad about Samford, but we understand that more talented teams are coming. And so feel good about this one. Obviously enjoy it for 24 hours and then flush it because A&M's more talented and a bunch of teams on your schedule are more talented. And eventually they're going to have to settle on five guys up front. and use some of these guys as injury backup. You're not going to be
Yeah.
able to rotate guys just constantly all year long.
That's why it's tough. It's tough to give a real analysis so far because it's like I just feel like we've seen so many different combinations up front. Where if you told me, "Hey, name the definitive starting five going into the next game," it's like there's a couple up for grabs still on that. So you feel like Harris and Slaughter are pretty solid, but it's like the rest of them you can feel like hey, you can rotate, probably see a little more rotation on that. I don't think it's a settled situation at all. So A&M hopefully sheds a little more light into that as we start SEC play. But that matchup in particular up front on the offensive front with the Aggies defensive line, um, definitely would like to see something there. Will from the passing game, love seeing Hawkins and Mazzell. They only caught one pass each, but just seeing their flash was good. Like they got to flash some potential. Uh, we need those deep threats, and we got a quarterback in Lagway that could potentially get the ball there. But from the tight end spot, that Hansen had a nice play up the middle in the seam this weekend. It was nice to see him downfield a little bit. I know we talked to Brandon Olson about that, and he had mentioned that Hansen should be used downfield a little more. That he's quicker than for a guy who's 6'7", he's quicker than he probably should be. But Boardingham, we haven't seen much of Boardingham so far. I'd like to see him get a little more involved against A&M.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Olson downfield, or I'm sorry, Hansen downfield is what Brandon
Yeah.
told us that they needed to do. That the little hitches and the little, go 8 yards and turn around, the Travis Kelsey stuff is not his cup of tea. And we did actually see him run one of those, I think, this in the game against Samford, and ended up about a yard short of the first down. I want to say it was the opening drive. I want to say that's why they wound up with that 4th and 1, is they didn't quite get downfield as far as they needed to. That's the Boardingham play right there, right? He's the shifty guy. He's the guy who should be able to run the little hitch, the little curl, maybe make a guy miss and then go from there. Um, I'm not sure Lagway, other than the fact that Hansen was streaking down the field, paid any attention to his tight ends the entire game. I thought there were multiple times where the tight ends were open and he took shots that were further downfield, which, will need to change eventually, because you do need to take what the defense gives you at times. At the same time, it's hard to get the tight ends involved when the wide receivers are open and the quarterback's hitting them. And I mean, it was like 22, 36, 45. Like the yardage that Lagway was chewing up going downfield to the wide receivers was really impressive. And I think it's one of the things you sort of take away. So, I mean, look, if you look at his passes, 77 to Badger, 44 to DK, 40 to Hansen, then 22 to Badger, 22 to Wilson, which was an end around, 36 to Hawkins for the touchdown, the 41-yard pass to Mizell, then a 24-yard pass to Badger, and then the 85-yard pop pass to Wilson. Like, those are not small plays, right? That's 9 plays for 391 yards. They average 43 yards per play on their explosives. When you have that kind of production, it's hard to get the tight ends that involved. So,
Hmm.
yes, it would be nice to see Boardingham get involved. But if Hawkins is streaking down the field behind 2 defensive backs and Lagway gets him the ball, I really don't care whether Arliss gets the ball.
Well, when you put it that way, when you put it that way,
No, I'm just
uh,
saying, like the wide receivers are going to be more active in a game where DJ Lagway is a quarterback. Like they are going to be more of a priority. When Graham Mertz is the quarterback, I think that the tight ends and the running backs are going to be more of a priority in the passing game. And that's just sort of the reality, because Mertz is throw it short to open it long. Lagway is throw it long to open it short. And those are very different approaches, and that sort of dictates who you think might take a step forward and who you really want to see take a step up.
in the backfield, Montrell Johnson. If you did not know about the report in fall camp about the knee issue, would you even know anything was wrong with him?
No, I mean, he's looked really good. In fact, I mean, geez, when he hit the big run against Miami, it was one of those things where you're like, I mean, he hit like a top speed of like 21 miles an hour. Like he
Yeah,
was booking.
he looks great.
But at the same time, an injured knee doesn't always slow you down. It might stop you from cutting. And he was never a guy who was like, ultra elusive. He was a guy who was going to run you over. And if you gave him a crease, he was going to be able to pop a big one. And he was able to do that in the game. And he had a bunch of really nice runs against Samford as well. So it's great to see him that he's out there and he's healthy, and hopefully they keep feeding him the ball. I'll tell you, Jaden Baws looked really good too. in limited time as well, other than the fumble into the end zone in this one. But hopefully you want to learn those lessons against Samford and not against Georgia. So hopefully that's a lesson for him. And as they get down in the red zone, he'll protect the ball a little bit better. But running backs overall have been relatively positive. I think against Miami, they kind of went away from it a little bit too early. The game plan was to have Mertz throw the ball early on. I think in the first 14 plays, they had like 11 called passes. Mertz had a couple of runs, but it was 11 called passes. And that seemed a little bit lopsided. And in the game against Samford, when they were struggling early, what they decided to do was lean on Montreal Johnson. I still think that's something that they're going to need to do moving forward is you establish that run to open up the throws you want to make. And that's sort of always been the way that those West Coast 12 personnel, two tight end type offenses operate is you get the running going in one direction and then you come back the other direction with the flow against traffic in order to get guys open and enable yourself to take deep shots. And hopefully that's what Florida is able to do.
I don't mind seeing Jacoby Jackson getting a couple touches every now and then either. But do you expect to see Trayon Webb be a little more involved heading into SEC play?
I mean, I think so, just from the standpoint of you want to keep Montreal Johnson healthy. But I think
Hmm.
a lot of it also has to do with what Billy Napier's trying to do. Now, Napier was very specific in fall camp, and he called out Trayon Webb as his best blocking back, his best pass protection back. And so, if you're going to take deep shots, you need a guy who can block. And so that's actually where I would think we'd see Trayon Webb more often than in other situations is when you know you're going to go max protect, you know you want to take a deep shot, you make sure Webb's in there to pick up the blitz if the defense comes with extra guys so that you have the opportunity to get the ball off. So I think if Webb's getting more time, that probably suggests that Lagway is getting more time because it suggests that Florida's going to take some more deep shots and they need that pass protection.
Well, let's keep it short and sweet this week. Good win over Samford heading into SEC play. Texas A&M coming up. Aggies coming to town here with Mike Elko, so that should be a fun matchup here. Hopefully, we go in the right direction at quarterback. Will, I'm nervous. I'm just gonna say it's Sunday night right now. I'm nervous. I should be excited, but I'm nervous right now. So hopefully,
Well,
hopefully we see the right thing transpire over the course of the week, and hopefully, I know Billy Napier press conferences usually give us a ton of clarity for specific questions that are being asked, but hopefully what you're saying is what transpires. I'm looking forward to seeing the right decision be made this week.
so me too. I do have one thing to add before we leave. So I wrote something in my article this week about parking on campus during these football games. I'm really close to this Harmonic Woods tailgate that's out there on Museum Drive. If you have an opportunity, stop by. It's an awesome group of people. But the university decided they were going to rope off some stuff that some areas where people have been parking for 20, 25 years at this point. They didn't tell anybody they were going to do it. So everybody just shows up and goes, oh, the place I used to park for the last, 2 decades is no longer available. So I wrote something this week comparing it to Christmas Vacation where Chevy Chase's character Clark gets an opportunity to confront his boss about the Christmas bonuses and that sort of stuff. It sounds like they're still going to be roping stuff off on campus this week for the A&M game. So if you feel so inclined, obviously don't threaten anybody, but make your voice be heard. Phone number is 352-392-7275. That's 352-392-7275. You can call the university, let them know that you don't want them to take away the grass parking for the fans. Look, it's tough to get on campus. I know for these games. I mean, I usually Uber in or I have some other ways of getting some parking there, but the parking on campus when I was a kid going to school there was terrible, even when it wasn't a game day. But
Hmm.
just part of the ambiance of a University of Florida game is all the pickup trucks that are parked on the grass all throughout campus, where you walk around and get an opportunity to meet all those people who are out there tailgating, and that's part of the experience. And so I hope the university takes it to heart, keeps that experience in line for everybody who's out there, because we haven't had a lot to cheer for on the football field over the last few years, but the best thing I can say about the Harmonic Woods tailgate is their motto is "We've never lost a tailgate," and after having attended a few of them, I can tell you that's true. So if nothing else, support those guys. Again, the number's 352-392-7275. Call the university, let them know. Again, don't threaten anybody, no physical harm, don't be ugly, but let them know that you'd like to be able to park on the grass when you have an opportunity to come see a University of Florida football game.
And for those who don't know, where does the Harmonic Woods tailgate?
Yeah, it's right on Museum Road. It's across from the fraternities there. If you look up Harmonic Woods on Google Maps, it'll show you Harmonic Woods right behind right behind the frat houses. But you actually want to go to the south side of Museum Road. You'll be able to find him there. Gator Dave's usually out there with his Gators breakdown stuff. The high top guys, especially Dave Soderquist, are usually out there as well. It's a really good time, and tell people that we sent you if you go over there. Throw a couple of bucks in the plate while you're there too, because it's not cheap to put on this stuff these guys do every year. Those of us who go there often, or at least support them, pay dues every year. So definitely throw something in the collection plate if you come in. But it's a blast, man. If you've never been, you should go, because it's part of the experience. I took Max 2 years ago, and we brought a 12 pack of Dr. Pepper. And the other day we were talking about going down for the LSU game, and he's like, "Dad, are we going to the party before the game?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir, we are. Yes, we are." And he was excited. So hey, if it's the LSU game, come out to the Harmonic Woods tailgate. You get to meet me while I'm out there.
That's great. That's great. For the picks section, we are going to start doing the weekly picks on Patreon, but we're going to keep it free. You can be a free member on Patreon. That there's an option to do that. If you want to support us on Patreon, we would obviously greatly appreciate that. But we'll be putting those on Patreon because I was talking to Will. Hey, we just got done. We just digested a whole weekend. We're still digesting the weekend of football. To turn your attention to the next week already, let's see a couple injury things. Let's see what comes out. We'll post the picks on Fridays or Saturdays, either Saturday morning or Friday. One of those two. We'll get them up on Patreon.
Well, and for people who are curious, you're posting stuff over there on Patreon, your sort of perceptions of the team, and then when we can, which is most games this year, but there will be a few that we can't. I'm doing a live post game show afterwards. So for $2 a month, or I think we got 2, 5, and 10 are sort of the levels of support. You can certainly support more if you'd like to, but we do that live show over there, and certainly in the off season, I think you and I probably have some plans to put some actual like learning type material up there about football, about reading defenses and sort of some of the basics, but also getting into more advanced stuff as well. So check us out over there, patreon.com/reading reaction. Like I said, it was a lot of fun last night to sit there and do the post game show and talk about DJ Lagway and talk about how much fun it was. And so as miserable as it was the week before to sort of lick our wounds after the Miami game, it was pretty awesome to pump things up after the Lagway performance. So
Hey, listen, man, first win since October of the year 2023. So don't take it for granted, enjoy the moment. Enjoy the moment. Even though it's Samford one more time. It is Samford. We know.
it doesn't matter, dude. We get 12 of these every year. And I used to say we got 13 because we were guaranteed the 13th, because Florida always has a winning record and always goes to a bowl game. And that has proven to not be true over the last few years. And so we only get 12 of them. You got to enjoy each and every one. And that's one of the reasons why I'm harping on the tailgate, is because Max remembers going to the football game. He remembers Amari Burney intercepting the pass against Utah to win that game. He remembers going to that Florida State game and thinking that we had the Noles there in the first half until Florida State was able to run away with it. But the thing he remembers the most is hanging out with people that we've now hung out with the last 2 times we've been there. And I've hung out with him before that, but the last 2 times he's hung out with people who've made him feel special and made him feel a part of the Gator family. And that's my worry, is that as this stuff gets more corporatized, obviously the conferences are changing. They're starting to come together. If Florida's starting to say, we're not going to have people park on the grass, and it's going to take, $30, you got to park off campus and get bussed in and all that sort of stuff, it changes the dynamic that quite honestly makes this such a unique experience. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about it. It's one of the reasons why I wrote about it in the post game article today. That, and I wanted to take a shot at Dan Mullen by calling him Cousin Eddie. But those are the things that make this special. We only get 12 of them, and Samford isn't the most exciting one on the schedule, but if I lived down there, I wish I lived down there. If I did, there's no place I'd rather be on a Saturday than over there at Harmonic Woods before the game.
Well, yeah, again, Will, if you want to say that number one more time.
Yep. So I scrolled away from it real quick. So it's 352-392-7275. Call and make sure that they've got the right parking plans for the university for the A&M game.
Have a great week, everybody, and go Gators.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to Stand Up and Holler. If you're interested in more information from me and Nick, you can go over to readandreaction.com. You can like and subscribe our YouTube channel here at Read and Reaction, or you can go to patreon.com/readandreaction to support us, get extra information, and we do Ask Anythings over there every once in a while as well. So check us out. Thanks for listening.